Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
At the 1 hour mark, I think it's time for some rapid fire.
Ready to go? Okay. So we're going to continue with more of the quarterback conversation. Fill in the blank. So Vince and I talked yesterday about that cut that I played from Gino Guidugli, listing the strengths of each of the quarterbacks. And you were getting ready to fire off on it just a minute ago in the first segment of the show. He said Kenny Minchey's greatest strengths are his athleticism and accuracy. And that means blank to you.
It means both good and bad to me at the end of the day, because the reason why I think it's good is because what was Riley Leonard at the end of the day? He was extremely athletic, and he was a relatively accurate passer because he wasn't pushing the ball downfield a ton. So he kind of lived in that 5 to 15, 20-yard range, and he did well with it, right? And I think more importantly, we know that a Mike Denbrock offense thrives with an athletic quarterback. Look at Jaden Daniels. Look at Riley Leonard. Like, it is an aspect of what it means to be quarterback for Mike Denbrock. But then on the flip side of that, it's kind of like potentially, a statement that you would give to a quarterback who, shows some flashes, but ultimately might not be put together fully as a quarterback, right? A guy who he makes his athleticism makes plays for him.
Gives him a chance to make better plays.
Yeah, despite maybe lacking some of the traditional quarterback fundamentals. So that's where I'm like, this is almost like good and bad, or double-edged sword, because I think you do need that athleticism to play quarterback in a Mike Denbrock offense, or to really take a Mike Denbrock offense to the next level. But the way it's kind of being used in context with Gino Guidugli, I think he's kind of saying it that it kind of bridges that gap between the lack of maybe traditional, fundamentals that he may or may not have. And so, again, this is all speculation at the end of the day, but that's kind of how I interpret that comment.
Well, and that's what we have to do. We have to interpret the comments, because that's what we're given, because we're not able to actually get our eyes and, see any more of this than what we've been able to see. Now, we will be able to be out there at practice tomorrow, but again, it's going to be stretching first 4 periods. So we're not going to get to see a ton tomorrow unless they, dramatically alter, the periods, with what the periods are at the front of practice. And no, Tommy, there was no big show today. Brian said he had some things that he had to take care of. So no, there was no big show today. And I agree with what you're saying. And I agree with what Andrew was just saying as well. It's a nice compliment. He's a great athlete. But guess what? We've always known he's a great athlete. Going into year 3, it's kind of more about what they didn't say, or what he didn't say, than what he did say. He didn't say the same things that he was saying about C.J. Carr in that cut that we played earlier. He didn't say that he's got a great command of the offense. He didn't say that he's got a mastery of the offense. He didn't say that he makes great pre-snap reads and all those kind of things. He is still a great athlete who, it sounds like, is getting by with some of that. And, like what Andrew was talking about as well, like maybe he doesn't protect the ball best in practices. That is such a big part of it as well. Like being a quarterback, you can't turn the ball over. And I think of the 3 that, unfortunately, Kenny Minchey is at the top of the list in terms of like who turns the ball over the most of those 3 quarterbacks. From everything that we've seen at times and heard as well, it tends to be Kenny Minchey. Even though, again, like going back to a year ago in spring, it was Steve Angeli as well. But that's just, you didn't hear him list all those other things that go into being a guy who would be, like in line to win the job. Like, that's what stands out to me more than what he said. It's what he didn't say.
Yeah, agreed. And I think I hate doing this, but in those clips that I saw last week of the quarterbacks going through individual periods where they were doing that drill where Gino was kind of pointing and they were side shuffling through the bags, and then they would throw. Kenny Minchey looked the best during that. but that's because he's
like
probably
in
the
terms
best
of
athlete of the group.
right, exactly. His athleticism kind of helps carry him in a drill like that, where it's like he stays balanced and like he's not off balance and all those different things. But again, there's more to being the quarterback than just going through a drill with some pads and shifting left and right and whatever else. There's a ton more, like that's part of it. But there's a heck of a lot more that comes with it. I mean, we all want to get our eyes on him, right? Like that's what would be great, right? We'll get our eye, again, we'll get our eyes on him to some extent tomorrow, but it's not going to be nearly enough. It's not going to be nearly what anyone wants to see. Okay, so new Irish running back coach Ja'Juan Seider had all of his new running backs when he got to Notre Dame send him their weaknesses that they want to work on. So what did Jeremiyah Love tell Seider that he wants to work on as his weakness?
For me, it's just I just want to make sure I'm more efficient with my runs. I averaged, I think, like close to 7 yards a carry last year. So I want to try to get that higher and just work on getting north, because I make a lot of moves, and which could, limit my yards and not allow me to get as many yards as I can. But just be more efficient, get north when I have to more. And that was pretty much the only weakness I identified. I mean, I have things I can grow on, but I would say that's the only thing I really need to focus on getting better at.
All right, so Jeremiyah Love was talking about more yards per carry. What do you think about that response?
I think it's crazy that a guy averaging 7 yards per carry thinks he needs to up his yards per carry. Like, when I read that, I had to read it again. I was like, "Are you sure?"
Was that really the answer?
I can get on board with the north and south thing. Just kind of, I have nothing wrong with making a move, but once you make your move, I think you need to put the foot in the ground and get north to south, especially as you start to transcend, against better levels of competition and going against the NFL. Like, that lateral stuff isn't going to work anymore because everyone's fast, big, and strong, right? And so I respect and agree with what he's saying, is he could work on getting north and south more, which it's not like he's a bad north and south runner, right? So he just needs to figure out how to get into north and south lane and just go. But the yards per carry thing,
well, look,
I don't know.
I'm looking at it like this because I think I understand what he's saying, because I think that you can put both Love and Jadarian Price into this, because like in the Indiana game, as an example, last year, the touchdown run, his first carry, was it his first carry? Yeah. Well, in any case, the touchdown run goes 98 yards. The other 7 carries that he had in that game totaled 10 yards, a total of, 10 net yards, those others. So he had an actual yards per carry of 13.5, but a lot of it was due to the one carry for 98 yards. And that was kind of, that was kind of the thing for both Price and Love last year, because of the breakaway speed that they had. Once they get into the open, like they were going to make an explosive play, right? But those other, 7 to 10 carries per game, the yards per carry on them was a lot lower. They were all much more like in the 3 to 4 yard range. So I think what he's saying, to an extent, is, this is how I interpret it anyway, is it's not just about the one explosive play for either one of those guys. You would like to see much closer to 4 to 5 yards per carry, and even, like for those others that don't end up going 30 plus yards downfield.
Yeah, so I think the better word would just be consistent outside of his big runs, right? So
right.
Remove the big runs. He wants to be consistent on every run of being, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 yards. And I agree on that. And it's funny because it is something I thought about before. I was like, man, if you remove some of those big runs from Price and Love, I think a lot of people give criticism that, some of those other plays, there really aren't netting to much. And so if you want to be an efficient runner, you need to be getting, 7 yards per pop on every run, not just the big ones, or allow your big runs to kind of, add a lot of fluff to your yards per carry. And I think that would be something for interesting to look at. And as a running back room is if you subtracted out our 1 or 2 big runs per game. And I know that that's kind of not fair because you set up and eventually hit those home runs throughout the game, but you still want to be more consistent and efficient on all the other runs. And so I now have a more appreciation for his response.
But the other part of that is, there's two different things. Like Al says, improved offensive line play, would go a long way. More consistency on the offensive line. I do think that we're going to see that ultimately. But the other part of it is if you have a quarterback, and that's why who ends up winning this quarterback job is going to be so important. If you have a quarterback who can also consistently make more plays downfield, which, let's be honest, we haven't seen that kind of quarterback in a while here at Notre Dame. But if you have that guy, that's also going to help loosen things up in terms of how teams have to defend you, right? Like that's going to go a long way and help open up even more running game for guys who are explosive like Love and Price. Okay, so Love also talked about whether it was beneficial to work as a wide receiver last spring.
It was definitely a great investment. I mean, just always having those tools in your box if you want to, pull them out, or if coach wants to, put me out wide. And this spring, I am doing it. I've already been doing stuff and just ain't seen it. But yeah, it's a great investment. More weapons for me or for the team. Get me out of space or get whoever out of space and work a linebacker or work a safety or something like that. So,
by the way, we were complaining about all the background noise. Hard to believe that was recorded about 30 minutes after the Gino Guidugli audio that we heard earlier, because Jeremiyah Love was the last guy to come in the room, so there was no one else in the room when that was going on. So you could obviously hear him much better. But I think Andrew, we're as much on the same wavelength today as we've ever been, because Andrew made the comment before we played that he would love to see Love play a bigger role in the passing game. So do you buy or sell, Jesse, more of Jeremiyah Love as a pass catcher this upcoming season?
I buy it, but you have to be selective about it. He's always going to be on a pitch count. And so, like he said, it might not be something that happens every game, but I think it has to be matchup driven or matchup dependent. But it's something you consistently want to work all the time because NFL scouts value that. They want running backs who can run the ball, pass protect, and catch the ball out of the backfield. And then I think, what you can get into potentially is, kind of schematically, how can you get Jeremiyah Love the ball in open space, or maybe how do you use him as decoy so everyone's focused on him and then something else kind of develops off of it at the end of the day. So I want to see more of it, but I don't want it to become so saturated that there's no more kind of element of surprise, or it takes away that big play kind of aspect. Like I don't want him out there just catching like a 1 or 2 yard slant route and getting banged up and tackled. I want it to be a very, boom type of play, right? Like it's something that's schematically been drawn up and worked on, because any of the wide receivers can go out there and catch a 2 yard slant, but not all the wide receivers are taking handoffs and taking a beating like Jeremiyah Love does consistently.
See, like Vince and I were talking yesterday about Ja'Juan Seider said that he wanted to see more of Love on third down this season, and I'm all about it. But they do need, I guess, to figure out a specific plan about how that's going to happen. Because like I said, just having Jeremiyah Love on the field on third down, he automatically becomes someone you have to pay attention to, whether or not he gets the ball, right? But I guess it does become a balancing act in terms of having him on the field, how many touches per game he actually gets, and how much you keep him involved in third down. Like third down is the most important down in football, right? Because you either extend your drive or you're off the field and you're punting. So to me, it makes perfect sense that you're going to have your most explosive player on the field on that down as much as possible. And that also plays into his involvement in the passing game. But to me, the more ways you can utilize him while also keeping in mind that you have to balance the actual touches that he gets. But the more you can utilize a guy like that, Marcus Freeman said it at the start of training camp last year, it ain't rocket science. You got to figure out ways to get Jeremiyah Love the football. And I think we all wanted to see him get more touches per game than what he had last year. But again, it goes back to his recruitment. Like Jeremiyah Love came to Notre Dame not wanting to, essentially sacrifice his body, at the expense of his, pro potential down the road as well.
The way I envision Notre Dame utilizing Jeremiyah Love is I think how they utilize their punt situation throughout the season. There should always kind of be an aspect of the unknown or what Jeremiyah Love is going to do on said play. Maybe he just goes out there and stock blocks someone on the perimeter.
Right.
But you kind of eventually lull a defense to sleep, and then bang, all of a sudden you're hitting this crazy, funky, fake punt and getting a big chunk play out of it. That's what I want to see out of Jeremiyah Love, is like that sort of kind of creativity that we saw with the punt unit. Like, don't just run him out there to run him out there. Like, you need to have a very clear objective. And if you're getting a certain look, this is something we've practiced with him and we know is going to go for a big play.
Right. Like Josh is saying, more 21 personnel, and I think we'd all like to
we could
see
do a
that.
whole show on that.
Right. I mean, it's, like we're beating a drum with it, but like there's a potential where, okay, Jeremiyah Love is in the slot and Aeneas Williams is in the backfield. Both of them have both run ability and pass catching ability. Like, Aeneas Williams can give you those tough yards on 3rd and short, but he could also wheel out of the backfield, and just as easily, because Jeremiyah Love is going to draw more attention, he can just as easily, give you a big completion as well. But at the same time, Jeremiyah Love, if you get him matched up with a linebacker, that's a matchup that you're going to try to capitalize on all day, right? So again, like just his presence on the field leads to so many different things, especially I think if you've got another running back out there with him on the field at the same time. Okay, so Notre Dame women's basketball coach Niele Ivey talked about the home crowds for the Irish in their 2 NCAA tournament games over the weekend. Here she is.
I mean, this is just really tough place to play. I'm really grateful for the South Bend community. They've shown up for this program and for me all season long. We've had the most sold out games. Today was a sold out game. So I'm really, really grateful for all the support, and you feel the energy, and they really sparked us right from the beginning, knowing that it was there was not an empty seat there. Coach Freeman in the house, we had former players, Devereaux Peters in the house, Skylar Diggins on Friday. So have a lot of support from our alum, but also the fans. They mean everything to us. So we're grateful that we had the opportunity to host.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to say before I ask you this question, Jez, I think that the Michigan atmosphere, definitely the best home game atmosphere. Maybe, like it's been a while since Texas and UConn, but it felt like even more of a fevered pitch for that game than either one of those games, because the producer we had in the studio, Karen Keys and I, we each had our headsets on like we always do. We didn't have a crowd mic, and he was asking if we had like an extra crowd mic that we were using so we could turn it down, because like so much extra crowd noise was coming through. So great atmosphere, for sure. My question to you is, is this an unfair advantage, for teams like Notre Dame or whoever is hosting? Do you buy or sell the women's basketball side of things, keeping 1st and 2nd round, games on campus sites? Would you like to see them keep them on campuses or potentially go to neutral sites going forward?
Yeah, I don't think it's an unfair advantage, and I'm going to buy that they should keep the 1 through 4 seeds as teams who get to host. And the reason why I say that is because I think the regular season should ultimately have a reward. And so these teams that, go through a gauntlet of a regular season, perform super well and get rewarded with these higher seeds, I think it's great that they have the opportunity to host, and then to kind of, get into more a logistical side of things. I went to the round of 32 games in Cleveland this weekend, Sunday evening, St. Mary's versus Alabama and New Mexico versus Michigan State. There was a good turnout, but it wasn't a sellout at the end of the day. So what makes you think if the men's, tournament can't even sell out, a neutral site, that the women's game is also going to have, that the women are going to, sell out a neutral site. And so I think that this is kind of that compromise of, well, not only does it reward the regular season, but it also makes sense logistically to get a lot of get a lot of butts in seats, and also give the proper amount of exposure that the women's game deserves ultimately at the end of the day. And so I think when you combine both of those things of, you still want a good turnout, you want a full arena, and you also want to reward the regular season, I think it's an easy buy on my end.
I agree. I don't think that the women's game is quite at that place yet. There's been growth over the last few years, in terms of interest, especially from a TV standpoint. But I think in terms of NCAA tournament games, like for every Notre Dame and UConn and, those kind of places where they will pack it in, I didn't see what the crowds looked like at USC. And we are going to talk about Juju Watkins here in a minute. But I was watching after the show was over last night, I was watching the Maryland-Oklahoma women's game that went to double overtime. And it was a great game, by the way, especially down the stretch. Maryland overcame a 17-point deficit, and they ended up winning in double overtime, even though Barker from Alabama ended up with more than 40 points in that game. It was a pretty great individual performance. But Maryland was hosting that game, and when they were doing cutaway shots of the crowd, they weren't sold out, so not even every women's host site is selling out. So I don't think that it's at a point where you would want to go to neutral site games. And I do think, as you said, continuing to reward the women's teams that had the great regular season by letting them, host these games. I think that is just as important, for the women's game right now as anything, keeping them on the campus sites. I think they need to continue to do that going forward. Tommy wants to know if Sony will be stuck to Haley Van Lith like glue this Saturday. I don't
know. I don't recall much of the first matchup, but Hannah and Van Lith are the 2 point guards, and Hannah leads the country in steals and also plays really good defense. I think Sony's size could be used for maybe some of the bigger players that like a more of a forward position than a guard position at the end of the day. Because I think Hannah can do well enough, or not even well enough, can do a really good job on Van Lith. But I think you want to use Sony's kind of size because she's a tall girl, over 6 foot. And she's also pretty, she's pretty built. She's not like jacked by any means, but she's got a nice foundation, a nice base on her. And so I think when you start going into maybe some teams that have a little bit more size and some bigs, I think Sony can be used more on that aspect. But maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, I can't say for sure how they're going to do it. I think that they'll obviously watch the first game, since they do have a game, against them. And, kind of use that as their starting point. And I can't tell you specifically exactly, at this point, 4 months later, who is guarding who. I haven't had a chance to go back and watch it. I know it's on YouTube, and I especially want to watch, some of the fourth quarter. But Van Lith scored 19 of her 21 in the second half in that game. I think that I would think that Notre Dame will try to mix up looks on Van Lith and be as unpredictable as possible. A formula that's worked out very well this year is where, Hannah picks up, whoever in backcourt and then kind of hands her off to Sony, once they get to the front court and that kind of stuff, make them have to work the full 90 feet up court. So I think there'll be some different looks. I would imagine Prosper, will mix in there as well. But I mean, Citron is still, in comparison, Hidalgo is great with the quick hands and like just being a nuisance, being a pest coming up court, whereas Citron is the better one-on-one lockdown type defender, and her size would be an advantage against a player like Van Lith as well. So yeah, they definitely mixed it up when Van Lith was at Louisville. She also had better talent around her as well. And Scott L. Esquire says he would love it if Sony just completely shut her down. She's talented offensive scorer, and she is often the straw that stirs the drink. And I agree. I prefer Citron's demeanor to Van Lith's demeanor as well. Going to be a great matchup. Looking forward to it, the Sweet 16 this Saturday. So I tell you what, let's go ahead and do this one first. Fill in the blank. Southern Cal women's basketball star Juju Watkins tearing her ACL in Monday's NCAA tournament game is blank.
It's sad, and it sucks for the game of women's basketball. Obviously, any athlete that gets hurt is going to be a tough situation. But then when you kind of mix in Juju Watkins being kind of the Caitlin Clark of the women's game this year, and kind of the popularity and the eyeballs that she brings to the game, I just think it's super disappointing, at the end of the day, because you're talking about, you can put Hannah Hidalgo, Olivia Miles, Juju Watkins, Haley Van Lith, and the guard from UConn, Buchers. You can put them in a bucket of probably the top players or the face of the game this season. And so when you lose one of those players for a sport that's, really trying to get on the same grounds as the men's game and has made a lot of progress in the last couple of years, it just really sucks to see someone like Juju Watkins go down.
Yeah, I mean, that's the difference. That's the biggest difference between the men's and women's games right now, is the fact that the women's game right now is basically like the men's game 30 years ago, when you had the Fab Five staying together for 3 years, when you had Christian Laettner and Bobby Hurley and Grant and those guys playing together for 3 and 4 years, and the O'Bannons and Tyus Edney and like UCLA and those kind of players, where you had 4-year careers basically, and men's players became stars by staying in college, whereas right now you only get like Cooper Flagg for a year and then he's going to be gone. It's like men's players don't become stars in the men's college game the way they used to even 20 years ago, let alone 30 years ago. But the women's game, you can become stars, and you listed some of them, and Van Lith is one of them as well. And obviously Hidalgo is one as well, but Juju Watkins is one of the stars of the game. And so it absolutely stinks for the game, and especially for her, obviously, because now it's essentially the same, kind of situation that Olivia Miles was in 2 years ago. Because of when this injury happened, this probably means you're not going to have Juju Watkins playing basketball next season, unless, she would opt to come back in February, and play, depending on how she is. You're probably not going to have Juju Watkins for at least most of next season, if not all of next season, because it's March, and what an ACL tear requires to be able to come back. And that also means, USC is coming to Notre Dame next year, because Notre Dame went out to Los Angeles this season. USC is coming here next year. And so you're more likely than not, you're not going to get that Hidalgo Juju Watkins matchup at Purcell Pavilion. And again, like, first and foremost, it sucks for Juju Watkins, but it also sucks just, for the greater game, because you're not going to have a high star power, 2 juniors who are both going to be in the running for National Player of the Year next year. You're not going to get that matchup on national TV. You'll still get the 2 teams playing against each other, but you're not going to get Watkins being part of it. So bad for the game, first and foremost, bad for her, and hopefully things go well for her in her recovery over the next year. What's going to be a really long recovery. So hope things best wishes obviously for Juju Watkins. Stanford has fired head football coach Troy Taylor today after the school investigated him for complaints of aggressive and hostile behavior, is what it was reported, towards colleagues, most of whom were women. The investigations concluded that Taylor's behavior was inconsistent with the standards of Stanford. So, Jess, I've seen some people questioning the timing of this firing, considering that the teams, it's spring practice time right now. Do you have any issue with the timing of this in regards to Stanford?
No, I have no issue. I wouldn't even have an issue if this was middle of the season. A bad coach is a bad coach. You still have a lot of spring ball left. You still have the whole summer and all the fall camp to kind of get things turned around. And, let's not forget, you also have Andrew Luck in charge of things now. And I think that should provide a lot of stability within itself, because he is one of the best players to ever go through, the Stanford locker room. He's been around a ton of successful coaches. He's played and had a ton of success at the highest level. So, yeah, again, a bad coach is a bad coach. And if those things are true and those investigations turned up what they turned up, there's just really no room for a guy like that at Stanford. So I have no problem with it.
Yeah, and like DJ said, the timing means it was ugly. They felt they had to do it. Unfortunately for this kind of thing, because again, like if he's bullying female staffers or, like aggressive and hostile behavior, towards anyone, male or female, if this kind of stuff was going on, like, it means that it had to be done right now. Like, would you want that guy around just so he could finish the spring, with the team? I don't think so, because, regardless of if you waited until the end of spring or if you do it mid-spring, you were going to fire him, obviously. So now you've got to go out and you've got to find a new head coach, so like for their program specifically, their program has obviously been in turmoil and, in a downward slide for a while. And it just means that they've got to go out and, find somebody else at this point. And Andrew Luck is a really good person, as DJ says. So it's like, it's a rock and a hard place. And unfortunately, like with this kind of stuff and these kind of accusations, you just have to cut ties as quickly as possible and turn the page as quickly as possible and move on, like regardless of when it happened. Fill in the blank. It's blank that NBC is reportedly interested in the Major League Baseball TV package that ESPN will be walking away from after this upcoming season.
To me, it's exciting. And when the ESPN, when the reports came out that ESPN was no longer going to have the joint deal with Major League Baseball, I was all about it. And the reason why I was all about it is because ESPN has just become so stale in their programming and Sunday Night Baseball, and having to listen to A-Rod and the guy over from the Yankees, Michael K, I think is his name.
You're gonna die if like they go out, like an NBC gets it and they're like, "Hey, A-Rod, you're free. Come on and do our games."
I guess what I'm saying is if they keep it in-house with NBC, I think that there's a lot better voices on the staff or kind of in-house of NBC who could, potentially do baseball. And I think it would be a great opportunity to kind of not rebrand, but kind of redo how baseball is being presented by a national network at the end of the day. And I think that NBC has a great opportunity in front of them to kind of, reinvent how baseball is being broadcasted on a national level because of, again, in my opinion, ESPN did a bad job the last 5 to 10 years and was putting out stale and boring content at the end of the day. And so I think it's a great opportunity for NBC to kind of revitalize things, because me personally, I like watching baseball and I can sit down and watch baseball, but I know that that is an unpopular opinion. People need to be entertained if they're going to watch baseball on TV. And so
Right.
what can NBC do to better entertain the fan, unlike what ESPN was doing?
DJ asks if it's more money from NBC. There's no actual, like money being reported right now. It's more just that NBC has interest. And like when when we talked on Rapid Fire, what's it been? Maybe a month or so ago. I think you and Vince and I were all here for it. Like, you were excited about the prospects because of what you were just talking about, like to get away from ESPN and see if some other outlet, whoever ended up getting it, would be interested. And I think, like, from the NBC standpoint, like, ESPN obviously has the Sunday night baseball package. They also have the home run derby, and they have the All-Star game, and then they had wild card, like a round of wild card playoffs that they were, televising. That was their package, basically. I think from an NBC standpoint, what probably makes this so intriguing to them is they already have Sunday night NFL football. So you've got that during the football season. They are also going to be, when they get the NBA next year, they're going to be doing a Sunday night NBA package. So that gets them basically January, February, March, April through the spring. And then, they'll have playoff basketball on as well. So then once basketball season is over, like, it's a natural fit. If you get this Sunday night Major League Baseball package, they could basically have, one of the three primary professional sports on Sunday night throughout the year. Like, Sunday night becomes sports night basically on NBC, NFL to NBA to Major League Baseball. So I think that that's probably why it's such a would probably interest them so much. And again, it's not like they're going to be, televising probably multiple national baseball broadcasts. It's going to primarily, I would think, be a Sunday night kind of thing. So I think it makes a lot of sense for them. What they're able to do beyond that, I think, will be, part of the curiosity, in terms of, are they able to do something extra? Like they're talking about bringing back, in regards to the NBA, they used to have, like a weekly, I think it was like Inside Stuff, with Ahmad Rashad and that kind of thing, NBA coverage. They're talking about doing some of that. So, like, would they maybe have, like a Baseball Tonight on Peacock, for example, something like that, because I don't see them using the network to do that. And Michael also said he read where MLB wants to throw out the local TV model and pull the whole package. And there's a lot more overall stuff in conversation and negotiate, all kinds of different packages I think are going to be tossed out there in regards to what Major League Baseball does going forward, because they obviously want a much more national presence than what they have, because so much of baseball has gone to the local regional sports network model over the last several years. But they also need, there's a lot that needs to change just in terms of their streaming as well, which you well know, like in terms of what you can and can't watch in different parts of the country when you want to watch a specific team. Like the stupid blackout rules. For some reason, in South Bend, Indiana, we are considered a local market for the Cincinnati Reds because, like Indianapolis, it's basically because of Indianapolis and its proximity to Cincinnati, as opposed to, Chicago, so like we're considered a local market for Cincinnati, Chicago, and Detroit. So, like, even though we don't get the RSN for Detroit or Cincinnati unless we pay extra for it, we get blacked out. If whatever team is playing the Cincinnati Reds, we can't watch it in this market, even though, we don't necessarily naturally get it on our TV. So you were kind of shaking your head like you don't care. So, all right, well, that's going to do it for tonight. We're going to wrap it up with that. We will get out and watch a little bit of practice tomorrow morning. We've got some post-practice interviews as well. So DJ says we kept engaged through a baseball conversation. We have won for the day. We've got DJ on our side for a baseball conversation. We'll wrap it up with that. Hit the like button before you leave, and we'll talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.